The next book that I read was The 100th Queen by Emily R. King, and this one was my first book that I read for the O.W.L.S Readathon. So this one was for charms, and this one was read a fantasy book, and I actually listened to this one on audiobook as well as reading it on Kindle. So it was one of those ones that was on Kindle Unlimited where I was able to, it was like the Whisper Net or whatever it's called, where you're able to also listen to the audiobook, which I think is really cool, and I really want to listen to the second one as well, which is The Fire Queen, I want to say, because this one was so good. Like, it was so interesting. Again, it was another one of those ones that was just a very fascinating world. It was a really interesting take on it. Almost reminded me of 1001 Nights. I don't know if it was a direct retelling, but it reminded me of that because of the whole, oh well, the king has all these wives and these courtesans, so it was just an interesting world because it's like, it's so misogynistic and like, you know, the patriarchy and everything, but at the same time it was like these women were fighting and surviving to stay alive. So I thought it was so interesting. It was just such an interesting world and interesting characters, and I really enjoyed this one, and I'm really excited to read the rest of the books in the series because I think that they are really cool because they've got that fantasy element, so of the elemental, what are they called? Oh, I can't even remember what they're called, but like like the outlaws, basically, like they're, oh, it's so cool. It is so cool. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This one was really interesting, and I really enjoyed this one. The next book that I read was Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco, which is the second book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, which the third one is coming out really soon. I'm super excited about it, so I'm really excited. This one was My History of Magic Owl, and this one I started in October, and I read a good chunk of it in October. I read to chapter 20 and then I stopped. I don't know why, I just stopped, and then all of a sudden I just never was getting around to it, So when I saw that it was, the History of Magic was the historical fiction, I was like, perfect, because even though I read a chunk of it, the bulk of it I read for the Owls. So this one was super interesting. I really liked it. Even though I took a break from it, like, I still really liked it. And just, Audrey Rose and Thomas have my heart. Like, they are the perfect couple. They're just so good together, and I love them so much. I loved all the aspects of this, and like the Romanian and Transylvanian history, which it's historical fiction, so of course there's fantasy elements to it, but this was a part of history that I didn't even know about, and it made me really interested to look up Romanian history because it just sounds so fascinating. And so I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm really excited about the third one because they're going to America and it's escaping from Houdini, which sounds fantastic. But this one I really enjoyed, and this one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars because Of course I did, because it was fantastic. So the next book that I read was For Arithmancy, and this one was a book with a number in the title or on the cover, and I read 17 First Kisses by Rachel Allen. I was really excited about this one because this one sounds really super cute, and I love the cover of this, and it's contemporary, and it's actually the only contemporary book that I had on my TBR for owls, which I was like, which is unprecedented because I always try to pick a lot of contemporary because they're really, really fast reads for me. But this one was I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I did like it. I liked the fact that it was, I liked the writing style of it. So you got to see all of the kisses, and it was just, they were so awkward. So it was so interesting because I really liked that, and like it was kind of a back and forth. Like it went from the present to the past, the present to the past, and it was kind of jarring at first, but at the same time I was like, it makes sense to go back and forth because it almost read like the kisses almost read like a diary in a way. But it was interesting to me, and I really loved the friendships in it, especially the friendships between Claire and Megan. Yes, Claire and Megan. Like, I thought that their relationship was so interesting because it like started out weird, but then it was like awesome. But at the same time, like, there were a couple characters that I would love to see it from their perspective, because there are a couple characters in here. Amberly specifically was like my heart and soul. Like, I loved her so, so much. And just, it was one of those ones that I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was good. It wasn't my favorite of the books that I read, but I did enjoy it because from what it was worth. It was a really fast read, and it was cute, and I really liked the relationships as far as the relationships between the girls go. But there were characters in it that I was just like, this is not realistic, unfortunately. And there was another thing that was really interesting to me was the call of needing to understand the difference between being a quote-unquote slut and being a quote-unquote prude. And it's just this slut versus prude dichotomy that was so interesting, that was what I was interested in more so than any, like, relationships, of course, and characters and character development. But that dichotomy that society, especially towards women and girls, is so backwards, but it's so fascinating because it's like this, it plays out so much in this book. There's some scenes in it that are very uncomfortable to read. So it was just really interesting seeing the dichotomy between the female characters and their stance on the whole, you know, what slut shaming is, and there's some other shaming in there, and that is just like, what is going on? This is horrible, but it's so relevant to today, especially for females. So it was interesting to read it from that perspective, and being older and not in high school, it was interesting to read. And I'm like, at the very end, I'm like, yes, girl, yes, just don't rely on the facts. Don't rely on guys to give you validation. Like, boys are stupid, and they don't validate you as much as a friend or even yourself or your parents or anybody else. Like, you don't need external validation. Like, so it was really interesting. So it was kind of like, it was interesting in that aspect, but at the same time there were very uncomfortable scenes. So I was kind of like, so I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was for Muggle Studies, and this one I read Night by E.W. Wiesel. I read this because it was super short. This is actually a reread for me. I read this one in high school and I decided to read it now because I was like, what are my thoughts and how they change over the course of X amount of years. And there are some things that happen in this one that I don't remember happening, but I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This one is one of those ones that I think everybody needs to read in their lifetime because it is so important to remember this part of history, even though it's super bad. Like, it's horrible. It is a horrible moment in human history. It is so important to remember it because we need to know that this happened so it doesn't happen again. And it is pretty relevant for today. Especially, it's very relevant for today, and I will say that. And that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave that. And gosh, this one, it took me a little bit longer than I thought it was going to, but at the same time, the reason why it took me so long is because I was just like, through the whole thing, because I'm like, this is heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, and I can't even imagine, just not even in my wildest dreams, I can't even imagine going through something like this. And so I actually read 17 First Kisses after this one because I needed something very lighthearted, because this one was super dark and just and if you don't know, it's a true life story of a young boy, E.W. Wiesel, who and him surviving through the Holocaust and being a victim of being Jewish in I think Poland, I want to say, if I remember correctly. So he was at first with the separation from the rest of the whole town in the ghettos, and then being transported in these cattle trains, which is just, oh God, it's so harrowing. It's horrible. And him living through Auschwitz and some of the other concentration camps that really escape my mind. And not because I don't want to remember, I honestly don't remember. I cannot for the life of me remember what they're called. But Auschwitz, he does survive from Auschwitz, and basically him and his father surviving. So it's just, gosh, this one is just, it's not for the faint of heart, but it's definitely one that I think that everybody needs to read at least once in their life, if not more than once, just to remind us about history and this inhumane part of humanity. Like, it is awful, and like I said, it's just so heartbreaking that this happened to such a young child, but it's so important. It is super important for history and for us to remember that this stuff happened. It happened. It happened. And we can't dwell on the fact that it happened. We have to say, you know what? This happened. We're gonna take what we know from this and move on and create a better world full of peace and love instead of hatred and prejudice. And this is so important for that. So, sorry this got like really down because that was not the whole point of this, but definitely something that people need to read. Please read this book. please read this book. The next book that I read for Divination. Originally, I had this one for Care of Magical Creatures, which was a book that had a magical creature on the cover, or about magical creatures in general, but I ended up changing it around because this one, even though it does fit with Care of Magical Creatures, I really kind of wanted to do Divination because I was like, I'm not gonna be able to finish a Discovery of Witches, because that is super long and I'm just not gonna be able to finish it in a timely manner without sacrificing all of the rest of the books. So I ended up changing this around, and so this was my Divination book, and it is Deep Blue by Jennifer Donnelly, and this one I gave 3 out of 5 stars. So this one was really interesting to me because it's a Disney Hyperion book. So I was expecting it to be a little bit more lighthearted. I was expecting it to be like, oh, mermaids. Mermaids are awesome. Mermaids are cool. I thought it was going to be lighthearted. Oh boy, no. It was super intense too. Like, so I don't know if it was, and that's not the reason why it downgraded in my ratings, because if anything, that actually saved it, because I was like, this is super intense. I really like this. This was so much better than I was expecting, and I really want to read the next 4 books in this series because it sounds super interesting. But this one, the reason why I was just not as big of a fan of it was because it was just world building after world building after world building, which is great for a foundational first book. But at the same time, it's like, and don't get me wrong, there's action in it. There's plenty of action in it. So much of the book was just devoted to this language. There is a glossary in the back, which I think is fantastic. When you have a world that is so different than your own, that's very fantasy and very, very dependent on this world building, it's very important to have a glossary or pronunciation guide in the back, because so people know. But this glossary starts on page 329 and it ends on page 340. So it's crazy to me that there's 11 pages worth of glossary terms and people in this book. So to me, that's what kind of killed it for me, was the fact that it was just, there was so much world building that it was like, okay, moving on. And like, I wanted to skip some of it, especially like some of the describing of the places and the palaces and stuff like that. So I didn't want to miss anything because everything was so important in it. And so 3 out of 5 stars. Like I said, it wasn't bad. And honestly, I think it was more of a 3.5, because now that I'm thinking back, like a lot of the action that happened was very, very intense. And so I think I'm upgrading it to a 3.5. But still, like, just too foundation for me. So, a little too world building. The next book that I read was for Astronomy, and this is for a sci-fi book, and I read Obsidio by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And this is the 3rd book in the Illuminae files, so the final book, and I was just, my heart. So I gave this one a 4.75 out of 5 stars, just because the ending was a little, it was a very well-earned ending, but at the same time I was like, I wanted more. So I was like, there were a couple things here and there that I'm like, that's what bumped it down. But my goodness gracious, such a great final book for such an amazing series, and such just a different type of series. This was probably one of the first YA books that really brought me into the sci-fi soiree. This one really like built up high expectations for YA sci-fi for me. So I really was I was super happy to read this, and I literally read 470 pages in one day. Because these are really super fast books because of all the dockets and the dossiers and the IM and chat format, but at the same time, 470 pages in one day, which is ridiculous for me because at most I can read about, just depending, maybe 140, like at most. 470, which is crazy to me, but it was so good. I could not put it down, and I am super happy with how and that's the thing, like, though the ending felt a little off to me, I really liked the ending. So I'm like, it's one of, I know it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain what was a little off for me, but at the same time, it was so good and well deserved for the characters because I love these characters so much, and I'm so happy with how it ended. Even though it was a little off to me, but I loved it, and I loved reading this, and it was so good. So worth the wait. And if you have not read Illuminate or Gemina or even Obsidio or any of the books, you need to definitely read them or check them out on audiobook. I hear that the audiobooks are like full cast and like really awesome, which I really want to listen to while I'm reading because I really kind of want the full thing. But at the same time, I'm like, I have so many other books I need to read as well. So it's kind of one of those things that eventually when I reread them, I do want to get the audiobooks for them because I want to reread them with the audiobooks because I hear they're awesome. But beside the point, definitely read this series because it's amazing. Oh, it's so amazing. Alright, and the last book that I read for the Owls as well as for April was To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo, and this was my Transfiguration book. And it was so interesting because I remember distinctly saying, I don't know why this is gonna be Transfiguration. I guess when I read it, I'll figure it out. Oh yeah, I found out why. Very much found out why. And it's so interesting because it's a dark retelling of The Little Mermaid, which I didn't know going into it. I was like so pumped for this one because it's dark retelling of The Little Mermaid, which the original story is super dark, and so Disney Disneyfied it, and then so this is just taking back the darkness of it, and it's so well written, and I was like really impressed with it. And I think I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars because it was just so gorgeous, like the worlds and everything, and I would love to see more of this world. And I loved the ending. It was so pretty, and just like this was just a perfect way to end the Owls on a high note. Like 100% awesome. Alright, so those were all the books that I read in February, March, and April, as well as the books that I read for the OWL Readathon. So I ended up reading one for February, one for March, and 8 for April. And then I read 7 for the OWLS Readathon, and I got a outstanding mark because you had to read 5 or more. So I was like super happy and impressed, and just like really proud of myself. I was a little bit disappointed. A little bit disappointed that I didn't read all 12, but I guess you'll just have to wait and see what I plan to read in May. So, thank thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video and comment down below and let me know about the books that you read in April. I'm gonna go with April since it's almost May because February and March, I just wanted to get it out of the way and say, hey, these were horrible reading months, but I didn't actually get to talk about them, and I kind of wanted to say, hey, these are the books that I read. But let me know about the books you read in April. Did you participate in OWLS? And if you did, how many did you get? Did you get an outstanding or did you get a troll? Which one did you get? I would really like to know. And also let me know about if you read any of these books and your thoughts as far as they, like, my perspective or my thoughts, and let me know. Start a conversation, start a discussion. I would love that. Alright, so thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can hit the button that is right up there. You can also check out my latest video. It is right there. And also check out all of my other wrap-ups. They are found in playlist right there. So definitely check those out. And thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, happy reading. Bye guys.